Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Happy Hour podcast. I am Kyle Anthony, your host for today. We are talking UFC 315, headlined by Belal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena. We're going to be breaking down 4 plays here on the show today. Now, if you want to become a client, link down in the description. Have a bunch of plays up right now, but I do have a 5% max bet up over the last year. We're about 73% win rate on our max bet plays overall. I do have 4 plays in there right now, and this may be the most units I have deployed on one card overall. So very excited about this Saturday night. But with that being said, let's dive into the main event of the evening between Belal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena. Now we've got the current champion at minus 192 in the comeback here on JDM plus 160. Now, this line opened up minus 240 on Belal, and money has consistently started to come in on JDM here, pushing this line a little bit closer. Now, the big question here in this fight is really going to be, is Belal Muhammad going to take down Jack Della Maddalena? Is he going to implement that wrestling? And is that going to work out for him? Is he going to be able to find that success? That's really what we're going to be asking ourselves, and hopefully I can answer that here on this breakdown. Now, this is going to be a grappler versus striker type of matchup here, and you're going to look to see that Belal wants the cage push. He wants those takedowns. He's going to sell out for those takedowns, and that's really his game. It's a rinse and repeat type of situation. Now, the issue here for me on the Belal side is going to be the fact that he's just not very dangerous. It's hard to call a current champion not dangerous, but he just isn't. When you look at it overall here, at this price, his finishing upside is just very limited. It's just very limited overall. He pretty much uses his striking to cut distance. He doesn't have the ability to really just outwork a guy in the feet unless you're Sean Brady, who was flown on to the other side of the planet and just had a bad performance. But besides for that, his striking is just very basic overall. He has said that he isn't going to take down Jack. He's going to strike with him. That's definitely not happening. He's definitely going to look for takedowns, but where he does have and has found success is weaponizing cardio and weaponizing his pace. And that's what going to be interesting part here to really see, can Jack, have the ability to go 5 rounds? Does he have that ability? And going back and watching tape for me, I do think that he does have the ability to nullify some of the good things that Belal does have. And I do think that he does have solid cardio. We have seen him battle through some tough fights overall. We're going to talk about both those fights in a minute. But he has had to get through some tough fights and push himself through that. And he's never really shown lack of cardio. So I do think he has that ability. Plus, he has shown good get-ups, good scrambling ability, even when he's taken it down. Now, there is an overreaction here, I do believe, from the market over these 2 fights against Basel Hafez and Gilbert Burns. Now, both of those fights, anyone who's betting Belal will point to those and say he's been taken down multiple times and all of those things. But there is a caveat to really both of those. And the Hafez side, JDM had multiple opponents cancellations over 2 weeks and had multiple weight cuts. And that there right out the gate, not only just changing opponents, but the weight cut, having to worry really about just kind of getting to optimal condition, and he's going to be very weak. I thought that just was a tough setup for him overall. Hafez did have a good first round against him. He was only 3 for 20 on takedown, so it wasn't like Hafez was just washing him on the ground overall. And then the other fight here was against Gilbert Burns, which was actually a 5% max bet on JDM. And in that fight there, I watching that fight, I'm like, why is JDM not fighting right? What's wrong with him? Something seems off. And yes, he ended up getting that victory, cashing that ticket, but we did find out that early in that fight in round 1, he broke his arm. So the fact that, Maddalena was able to really push through that and still find a late knee and finding the finish is just absolutely fantastic. And I think that he has an absolute dog in him in this spot. And you look at JDM at this point here, I do believe he's fighting Belal at the right time. There's an 8-year age gap between these two. And when you're talking 8 to 9 year age gap, the younger guy wins about 68% of the time. Now you already have that, and youth is on his side. Plus, I do think he's showing improvements. He's showing he has a good get-up game. He's showing he can, work back to his feet, create the space. And that's really Belal's heavy win condition. And I do think that also he mixes up targets very well. His boxing is absolutely sensational, works the body well, mixes it up, and really makes it difficult for opponents to defend. And I think that at this point, we're really saying that Jack has all of the finishing upside on him. So at this plus number here, I got to go Jack Della Maddalena. I think that this is the right time for him. I think he can look for that finish late, but I do think he gets the job done at this plus number. So I'm taking Jack Della Maddalena plus 160. The next one here we're going to talk about is going to be Manon Fiorot. She is minus 140 on the comeback here. We got Valentina Shevchenko plus 120. Now, there is no doubt Valentina is a legend, right? She is the legend, a flyweight legend, has had 13 title fights in her career. She's well-rounded, has added wrestling, to her game overall. But with that being said, it kind of feels like this is the decline of Valentina Shevchenko as much as maybe some of the public is not ready for, but I do feel like this is, and I don't think that it was really her last fight against Grasso. I think it was really a couple years ago where we started to see the decline against Talia Santos, where a very scrappy fight overall, and Shevchenko, a big favorite. And, Talia made it close, had multiple takedowns, multiple submission attempts, had 9 minutes of control time, split decision, did go to Valentina. And some people did think that Santos did win, which, again, you're seeing cracks in her armor a couple years ago. Then she has the trilogy with Alexa Grasso. And this is really where I think it appeared where, Valentina really started to slow down overall. And this is also why she had to start really leaning on the wrestling. And that really, again, starts to open up opportunities here for Manon. But in that fight against in those 3 fights against Grasso, Shevchenko had 16 takedowns, and that is a large amount of takedowns for her. She needed the control time. She needed to bank rounds. And, Grasso, she's tough. She's gritty. She's going to come forward. She's going to throw, and she's going to not stop fighting. That's how she almost got that finish, or she did get the finish in the first one. Even in their last fight, she was, crawling on Shevchenko's back and, trying to get the finish and landing some shots. So that is really, what she was able to do. But the physicality difference between Manon and Grasso are wide. Now you've got Manon Fiorot, who is massive for the division, who is top notch when we're talking about takedown defense. Her takedown defense, 93%. And we also did see that, recently against Erin Blanchfield, what she did. Now, I was actually at that fight in Atlantic City, front row. And it's not just the fact that some people may say Erin Blanchfield, just had a bad game plan. She wasn't able to get takedowns. Now, she was 0 for 3 on takedowns against Manon, but really, I think the thing you could see very clearly is the fact that Erin realized, I'm not going to take her down. I'm not going to be able to. I don't have the physical strength to take this woman down. And she just said, hey, I got to just stand and strike. I'm not going to have the ability. She was taking shots, and as she was trying to look for takedowns, and said, I can't do that. And she gave up on takedowns. This year on Saturday night, I think that Manon has the same physicality and strength advantages, and I think she can be able to bully her way out of any type of clinches, any type of opportunity for Shevchenko to look for those takedowns. Back that up also, with Manon, who has high-level striking overall. She's got a high-volume output. She will absolutely push that pace, and there's times where we've seen, Shevchenko just be very stale on the feet, overly weight or overly look for the right shot to counter. And that's where Manon could really start to pick up rounds, land good shots. And I think she's going to be the harder hitter between these two. So I just think that this is a spot where Manon Fiorot has the ability to get the job done. I think still at minus 140 is not a terrible number here, but I do like her in this spot. I think Manon gets the job done. So give me Manon Fiorot as the new champion. Next one here we're going to talk about is Jose Aldo minus 220. On the comeback here, we've got Aiemann Zahabi plus 175. Now, this is a spot where we've got Aldo, who is a sizable favorite here. And, I get it. The guy is a former champion, legend, in the UFC, has had 32 pro fights, fought top level guys throughout his career. But, this kind of feels like one fighter on the rise and one fighter on the decline here. And you've got Aldo, who's 38 years old. You've got Zahabi, who's 37, and they're very close in age. So there is that where they're close in age, and that part of it. But the MMA mileage is very much built up on the Aldo side here. And you have had Zahabi, who, years ago really just wasn't active in the UFC, just really, taking sparingly fights. Didn't seem like he was fully pushing in the UFC. And now over the last few years, he has really looked a lot better. And he's had a nice 5-0 run in the best shape, I think, of his career, and has looked really good overall. Definitely good. And Aldo, retired, came back. He was boxing. He's, is he, what's he really doing at this point? And 3 of his last 5 fights were boxing. He's 1-1 since coming back to the UFC. He beat, Jonathan Martinez, who I don't really rate that high overall. But it's just at the point where you just don't really believe that Aldo is fully invested into MMA at this point. I'm not saying that I don't know his work ethic. I don't know what he's doing in that particular side of it, but the guy retired, then he went to boxing, then he's coming back to UFC. Who knows what he's really doing? Who knows what he's committed to at this point here? And this could be the worst version, of Aldo, and maybe the best version of Zahabi come Saturday night here. Now, stylistically, I do think you're seeing a lot of improvements from Zahabi here. And one of the big things is, he's been knocked for kind of having low volume striking output. And you've seen over the last 2 fights, he has increased that dramatically, and both of those fights, even his most recent fight against Pedro Munoz, he landed 109 significant strikes. So he's really starting to push that up. Plus you add in that, he's got solid striking defense. He's got a 71% striking defense. He's very defensively sound, so he can look to land, counter, steer clear, get out of danger. And I think he can work those angles and find a lot of success on Aldo. And then also, in fact, we're not really seeing Aldo, utilize the leg kicks. That's something that I think that he, we hadn't even seen prior to really him retiring. There was a point where he was doing it all the time. He was one of the top leg kickers in the game, mixing them in really smoothly. And he just kind of gave up on it. And I don't really see him all of a sudden coming out here and really seamlessly putting leg kicks together at this point here, especially. He's really started to dive more into boxing. So I think this is a spot here where Zahabi, he's tricky on the feet. I like his striking. I think the volume will be there. I think some of the power will also be there for Zahabi, and especially at a plus 175 number, I'm thinking Aiemann Zahabi to get the job done. And the last one here we're going to talk about is going to be Modestas Bukauskas. He is minus 110. On the comeback here, we've got Ian Cutelaba. He is minus 110. Now, anytime we're talking a Cutelaba fight, we are talking a highly volatile fight in this spot here. The guy's got power. The guy's wild. The guy's also very explosive in that first round. He's willing to brawl. He's good looking to throw. And there's points where he's just not economical with his cardio. He'll just redline it at certain spots. We have seen him, start to be a little bit more patient in certain spots. Then he'll be crazy. But for the most part, he's a kill or be killed type of fighter. Now, Bukauskas, this is his second stint in the UFC, and I thought we've seen a lot more improvements from him overall. He's 4-1 over his last 5 since coming back to the UFC. And I just think in this spot, he's going to have a lot of advantages here. And I think in the striking, I just think it's a wide gap between these two here. I think that Modestas is very much more, technically sound in the striking. He has better footwork, better combinations. I think he's going to have faster hands. You have seen where Cutelaba, a lot of his offense is just big power overhands. Now, of course, those could knock anybody out, but they're just big power overhands. And I think the better minute winner out of these two is by far Modestas. Now, if he weathers that early storm, I think each minute that goes by, I think it will consistently increase his chances to getting the victory. And you've got Cutelaba at this point. He is who he is. We haven't really seen him ever add tools to his game. The only thing he's really done is maybe not be as crazy in that first round. But besides for that, you're not really seeing him add many tools to his arsenal overall. I think he doesn't really fight to a game plan. And the other thing is, could he look for takedowns? There's a possibility that the guy is explosive. He could maybe body slam Modestas in that first round. But outside of that, outside of a finish in that first round, I think that Modestas can stay safe, steer clear of danger, land the better shots, the cleaner combinations, and find opportunities to maybe find that late finish or win on the scorecards. But I do like Modestas here. I do believe he gets the job done, and I will be taking him at minus 110. So there you have it for my plays for UFC 315. If you want to become a client, link down in the description. And we've got a big card this weekend. Again, we've got a lot of cards coming up over the next couple weeks. And let's lock in and let's cash.